My name is John Troyer, and I'm here from the University of Bath's Center for Death and Society, the UK's only interdisciplinary study center dedicated to looking at death, dying, and the dead body. And I'm here to talk about three things today: future death, future dead bodies, and future cemeteries. Now, you can probably tell from my accent that I'm not from around here. I generally joke that I'm from Frome, and I've learned that it only works in the West Country because I made that joke up north one time and they just dead silence. They had no idea what I was talking about. I'm actually from the great state of Wisconsin in the north, the Midwest of the States. Lived in Minneapolis and St. Paul for a long time. But actually what you might all find more interesting is that I'm also the son of a funeral director. Ron Troyer, as my father, was a funeral director in the States for about 35 years. And I know in your heads you're all thinking, oh, it all makes sense now. But actually it's a much more long and complicated story. But the truth of the matter is, my entire life has been made possible by the fact that people die. And in fact, I grew up in a way that I did not realize was different until I was really a teenager. So for example, it was rather routine for my mother to say to my sister and me at Christmas morning, okay kids, we have to wait to open the presents this morning because Dad had to go remove someone who died last night, to which we'd say, okay, and we didn't realize that that was sort of abnormal for other people and friends and family. The other thing is, a lot of people will ask, so did growing up with a dad and who's a funeral director, did that have like an impact on how you developed over time? And the answer is, maybe. It could have. This is me at age 17. Can you see that in the back? This is a very important archival photo for my high school yearbook. But the answer is still joked on by my classmates. The late 80s were awesome, man. They were so great. God, I miss them. Anyway, but really what it made me comfortable doing is talking about death. Thinking about death and encouraging other people to talk about death. So right now, I want to talk about future death. Before you all leave today, there are two questions that I want you all to begin thinking about answers to. Your answers can change, and I'm not going to chase you down with a smoke machine to tell me what it is you have, but I want you to begin thinking about this. Everyone in this room is going to die, eventually. And in fact, across England, Scotland, and Wales, 1,500 people die a day. That's about a person a minute. There are two questions that everybody here needs to begin thinking about. After you die, number one, what do you want done with your dead body? Do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated, which is about what 74 to 75%, excuse me, I'm getting a little drier. 74 to 75% of all people in this country choose. Do you want your cremated remains shot into space? Do you want to be put in the ocean? Do you want to be pressed into a semi-precious little stone? Do you want to have an expensive funeral? Do you want an inexpensive funeral? What music do you want played? What music don't you want played? Do you want Come On Baby Light My Fire at the crematorium, which a lot of people do and they think they're being original, but they're not? Do you want to be cryogenically preserved for a future civilization that will have no use for you other than as a sideshow freak? What do you want? Question two. Have you explained those wishes to your next of kin? Do the people who are responsible for you know what you want when you die? Do they know if you want to be an organ, tissue, and bone donor, such as myself? If you've not had these conversations, why haven't you? What is preventing you from talking about something you know will happen? The reason I bring this up is because we're surrounded by stories that get people talking about death. This is one from February 2011. Many of you will remember this. It can be difficult to see, so I'll explain it. In 2011, the Redditch Borough Council in the Midlands announced a new plan in which they were going to recycle the heat from the local crematorium and use it to heat the leisure center pool. across the road. Recycle the heat from the crematorium and use it to heat the leisure center pool, right? These stories follow a simple trajectory. Monday, moral panic, outrage, shock. Friday, deep philosophical introspection. And this is exactly what happened, right? By Friday, the thought for the day on Radio 4, no less, was by the Reverend Dr. Michael Banner about how no less a figure than St. Augustine had made an argument oh so many centuries ago about how something like this respected the dead. Now, how is this plan even possible? Well, I'll tell you. Right now, across the entirety of the UK, about 257 plus crematoria are installing new equipment. They're required to by law because they have to begin filtering out emissions. The emissions they're particularly concerned with are mercury emissions coming from people's fillings in their teeth. Now, this equipment allows you to not only filter out the emissions, but through that filtration process, you can recapture and recycle that heat that otherwise would be lost. You've got a resource that is there that unless it's used, will go for want. So why not? So the Redditch Borough Council did something that I think is actually rather smart. They said, we're going to do this, we're going to invest in this, and here's how we're going to use it. Now, the reason we get all freaky about this at times is because it involves dead bodies. And what it points to is the future reality for what's going to begin happening to our dead bodies, but it's a future that involves a shock that is actually not new. It's what the historian of science, David Egerton, will talk about as the shock of the old. And I'll point to 19th century innovations that were themselves shocking and continue to be. Here is mechanical embalming, the ability to preserve the dead. Shocking in its own day, and for many people still actually rather disgusting. The telegraph. As soon as the telegraph line comes online, what do people start doing? They start sending death notices. They take what we think of as being the obituary and they send it across the telegraph lines, fully anticipating what we think of as now as being the social networking phenomena, right, of the Facebook and the Twitter, talking about when people die. Photography was used immediately to take pictures of dead bodies. Why? Well, it's a practical question, or practical point. Dead bodies were the best subjects. They didn't move much. It was also the best way to capture the last image of the person after they died. Children were very common, sometimes referred to as sleeping beauties. What's interesting about this use of photography is it still shocks us today. But we still do it, we just don't put those photos in our front rooms. Talk to any funeral director. He or she will tell you, I was asked, is it okay if we take a photo? Right? Let's jump into the 21st century. This is a tissue digester, which is why I'm not in charge of marketing, because no one would ever buy these if that's the name that got used. Sometimes it's referred to as resumation, which is a trademarked, copyrighted business term by Sandy Sullivan, Scotsman, who actually is simply using a process called alkaline hydrolysis, which works like this. A dead body is inserted into the cylinder, stainless steel cylinder. The cylinder is flooded with about 450 to 500 liters of fresh water, potassium hydroxide, which is a base similar to an oven cleaner. Pressure and heat are applied that then dissolve the dead body, leaving small bone fragments, getting rid of all organic matter, and then leaving any, if you will, inorganic matter. Knee parts, hip replacements, pacemakers, you name it. You then have about 550 to 600 liters of biofluid or post-process fluid, right? That then can be sent to the wastewater treatment facility for recycling. These are already beginning to pop up in America. They could be here, but you got to change the law. Two things about this. One, it's an interesting idea, and as much as people find it shocking, it's not that new. But why not use recycled water? You get a second or third use of the water to reduce a body. Number two, why not use the post-process biofluid as liquid fertilizer? What stops us from doing that? And I know right now most of you are thinking about Soylent Green, right? Soylent Green is people. But what is it about this idea of using the human body as a form of biomass? The dead human body is a form of biomass that freaks us out. Why are we so put off by the idea that we could do this, even though we already know that we consume it and we already have a model? It's organ donation. You're transferring one piece of biomatter to another body to use, right? We also do all kinds of recycling. We recycle the metal parts after people are cremated. This is a hip replacement. We can recycle all the metal from the knees, the hips, you name it, to then be melted down, resold for metal. Money usually gets donated to charity. It's great. You can recycle pacemakers. Pacemakers have to be removed before a body's cremated, because if it's not removed before it's cremated, it explodes in the crematorium, right? That's a whole other issue, but I won't go into that one right now. There's another system called cremation, created by Susan McMassick in Sweden. It's a simple idea. The body is frozen, it's dipped in liquid nitrogen, a vibrating platform then breaks the body apart into small little particles. The body particles are then put in a biodegradable box and used as human compost, right? This is the eater. Speaking of robots, the energetically autonomous tactical robot. It feeds off, it powers itself from biomass, leaves, sticks, grass clippings. But you know what? Also human bodies. And this might be exactly the thing we need in a mass disaster situation, right? When we don't have the future shack to save us. This is what we're going to need when we have a mass pandemic, potentially. And of course, RTI Robotics, which made this robot, they initially said, yeah, we could use dead bodies, but then everyone was like, whoa, whoa. And then they said, well, no, we were just kidding. But of course you could use dead bodies to do this. We are biomass in that sense. We are organic matter. Which brings me then finally to cemeteries. It is the cemetery that I think really begins to bring together these ideas of a future of death and a future of dead bodies. Because, of course, cemeteries are those places that we're all familiar with in one way or another. First of all, support your local cemetery. This is my local cemetery in Bath, Haycombe Cemetery and Crematorium. They have an open day every year in June. It's a great time. You should go. They have the cremation equipment I was telling you about that recycles the energy. They'll give you a full tour. It's a lovely time. It's a beautiful spot. But it's important, I think, to remember that cemeteries are these amazing sites of human technology, innovation, science, and history. They represent many, many kinds of innovations over time. So, for example, this is a cemetery outside of Barcelona in Spain. They've installed about 457 or so solar panels. They're powering now about 60 homes in the entire area to run all of their electricity off the solar panels from the cemetery. And you might ask, well, why did they use a cemetery? Because it was the one spot that wasn't going to be developed. It was the best spot to set up these solar arrays. Now, it took 3 years to do, took a lot of talking between a lot of people, but they got it done. And it's a brilliant use of a cemetery. But what it also betrays is this fact. Cemeteries are amazing open platforms for innovation and technology. And this is what I want everyone to begin to think about, the cemetery as a platform. Which brings me to a story many of you will have heard about the last couple weeks, which is this idea of cemeteries using QR codes now. The QR, or the quick response, sometimes quick reference code, can be attached to a gravestone. People walk in, they take a photo with their little smart gadgety device, and it takes them to a web link to show all kinds of amazing features. Okay, a couple things. One, I give these about 10 years, and then who knows, right? Two, they're kind of funky looking, but that's okay. There's actually different ways to do it. You can do stickers, you can do plaques, you can do all kinds of things. I actually prefer a system where they're actually carved into the gravestone, right? Permanently carved into it. If for any reason, future archaeologists are going to stare at them and be like, what the hell are these things? Having to like hack computers, because of course that technology won't exist, to come up and try and see what exactly is coded in there, if they can even figure that part out. But why this is actually important is it demonstrates that cemeteries are not just about disposing of the dead body. Cemeteries are about all of the digital and network technologies that we have and use today. A cemetery is a vast field of technology. So when we see a QR code, it's actually ironic, because a cemetery is filled with nothing but QR codes, which in decades, centuries before, any of us could have walked into that cemetery and we would have seen from all of the symbols on all those stones a lot of information about the people buried there. It's always been about coding information. This is just a new innovation in that. Now, I've been working lately at Bristol, at Arnisvale Cemetery, your local, 175, just over 170 years old, pardon me. About 300,000 bodies have been put through there, either through cremation or burial, just about a third of the population of Bristol City, right? 45 acres. And Arnisvale has opened itself up to be this kind of platform in which we've created something called the Future Cemetery Project. And what we've been doing is we've said we've got two guiding principles. We all know that death is in the future. We just want to make the future more visible. And in order to do that, we brought together a group of designers, technologists, creative programmers, heritage experts, you name it. There are two other key partners beside myself, Felicia Smith at Arnisvale, and then Jeremy Rutledge at Calling the Shots Media. And the idea is we just wanted to ask, what can a 21st century become? 21st century cemetery become? Oh, we used a lot of sticky notes. You know it's a creative project then. And we had discussions about what can happen, what can we turn into a future cemetery. There's a lot of answers I can give you about the future of cemeteries, and a lot of directions I can point you. But I think the one big breakthrough that's on our way, and the one that's going to be the most shocking to people, and I mean shocking in a way that we've already seen historically, is that cemeteries increasingly are going to begin using augmented reality and sort of mediated reality, depending on what term you use. By which I mean, you will be able to do something like this. Film a person, either a character playing the part of a tour guide or someone buried in a cemetery, or you before you die. Control that image, digitize that image, upload it, and then plant it on a network so that when you walk into the cemetery and either take a photo of just the space, so forget about a QR code, just take a photo of the space, suddenly that person is there talking to you. Now let's kick this up a step and talk about wearable computers. You walk into a cemetery with vision-enabled computing glasses and you see everyone in the cemetery. You get an entire history lesson across the board. That is the future of the cemetery. I guarantee it. Which brings me back to death. We all know that death is inevitable. We all know that at a certain point we're going to have to confront it. It also comes with many options. But death, more than anything, is about choices. So 2 questions. After you die, what do you want done with your dead body? Question 2. Have you explained those wishes to your next of kin? Thank you.